One evening I came home and my wife served dinner. Holding her hand, I said, "I need to tell you something." She sat down quietly and began to eat. I could see the sadness in her eyes. I wanted to tell her about the divorce, but didn't know how to start. Finally, I said it calmly. She wasn't angry, but she softly asked, "Why?" I didn't answer her, and this made her upset. She threw her chopsticks and shouted, "You're not a man." That night, we didn't speak to each other. She cried, and I knew she wanted to know what had gone wrong in our marriage. But I couldn't tell her the truth, that I had fallen in love with someone else, Jane. I didn't love my wife anymore. I just felt sorry for her. Feeling guilty, I wrote a divorce agreement. I offered her our house, our car, and 30% of my company. She looked at it and then tore it into pieces. The woman I had spent 10 years with now felt like a stranger. I felt bad for wasting her time, but I couldn't change my feelings. I loved Jane. She cried loudly in front of me, and though it hurt to see, it also made me feel more sure about the divorce. The next day I came home late. I saw my wife writing something on the table, but I went straight to bed, tired from a day spent with Jane. When I woke up, she was still writing. In the morning, she gave me her divorce conditions. She didn't want anything from me, but asked for 1 month before the divorce. She wanted us to try to live normally for our son, who had exams coming up. I agreed, but she had one more request. She asked me to carry her from our bedroom to the front door every morning, just like I had carried her into our home on our wedding day. I thought it was strange, but I agreed to make our last days together easier. I told Jane about this. She laughed and thought it was silly. "She has to face the divorce no matter what," Jane said. My wife and I hadn't been close since I mentioned divorce, so when I carried her the first day, it felt awkward. Our son clapped and said, "Daddy is holding Mommy in his arms." His words made me feel a little sad. I carried her from the bedroom to the living room and then to the door. She softly said, "Don't tell our son about the divorce." I nodded, feeling upset. Then I put her down outside the door, and she went to catch the bus. I drove to the office alone. On the second day, it was easier to carry her. She leaned on my chest, and I noticed how nice her blouse smelled. I realized I hadn't really looked at her for a long time. She wasn't young anymore. There were wrinkles on her face, and her hair was graying. Our marriage had aged her, and I felt sad about what I had done. On the fourth day, when I lifted her up, I felt closer to her. This was the woman who had given 10 years of her life to me. As the days passed, I felt even closer to her, but I didn't tell Jane. It became easier to carry her as the month went on. One morning, she was trying on dresses but couldn't find one that fit. "All my dresses are too big," she said. Then I realized she had become so thin, which was why I could carry her so easily. I felt a deep sadness because she had been hiding so much pain. Our son came in and said, "Dad, it's time to carry Mom out." It had become a normal part of his day. My wife hugged him tightly, and I turned away, afraid I might change my mind about the divorce. On the last day, I could barely carry her. Our son had gone to school, and I held her tightly, saying, "I didn't realize our life was missing love." At the office, I rushed to Jane and said, "I'm sorry, Jane. I don't want the divorce anymore." She looked at me in shock and asked if I had a fever. "No," I said. "I've realized that our marriage wasn't bad. We just stopped paying attention to each other. But now I know that I should hold my wife until death do us part. Jane slapped me and slammed the door. I left and bought flowers for my wife. I wrote on the card, "I'll carry you every morning until death do us part." That evening, I came home happy and smiling, but I found my wife lying in bed. She was gone. She had been sick with cancer for months, but I was too busy with Jane to notice. She knew she would die soon and wanted to protect our son from the pain of a divorce. In his eyes, I was still a loving husband. It's the little things that matter in a relationship. It's not the house, the car, or the money that makes you happy. These things can help, but true happiness comes from the small moments and care you show each other. Be your spouse's friend and cherish the little things. That's the secret to a happy marriage.